We are 1 month away from the NFL draft. What will the Dallas Cowboys do at number 12? We'll tell you on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we are 4 weeks out from the NFL draft. It is just around the corner. We're going to get into what we think the Cowboys might do at pick number 12. We'll talk about some trade-up options. But one of the things that's becoming clear are who are the top 10 or 12 players in this draft. We got a new consensus board that came out today. How are you feeling about the top 10, top 12 players of this class overall?
Yeah, I mean, it's feeling like the dust is settling a little bit over these last few weeks. It does feel like we've gotten a kind of solid grouping of 10, right, that are at the top. And as we start to see kind of the boards sort of settle a little bit, the movements that are going to happen have already happened, likely. We still got pro days coming up. That may move the needle a little bit, mostly negative, honestly, depending on what happens, right? But I do think that there is just, we've kind of gone through a lot of the stock roller coaster aspect of this, short of, pictures of someone in a gas mask showing up on draft night. I would say that
can't rule it out.
You certainly can't rule it out at this point. That's right.
So, all right. So of the top 10 players, it's Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Ashton Genty, Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU, your guy, Tyler Warren, Jalen Walker, Armand Membu, Will Johnson, and Cam Ward. Those are your top 10 players on the consensus board. And then there's a gap. Like we're starting to see some tier breaks. There's some tier breaks between like Carter and Graham and then a couple of guys down. But those are your top 10 players. I think the one that I wanted to ask you about that's the most interesting to me, Landon, is Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan, because you look at all these mock drafts over the last couple of weeks, and you'll routinely see Will Johnson falling into the 20s, right? Going to Pittsburgh at 21 or the Ravens at the back end of the first round. There is no draft expert out there when you're talking about Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper, Field Yates, Matt Miller, Jordan Reed, that has him worse than their 13th overall player.
Yeah.
Are we not talking about him enough for the Cowboys?
I mean, I think it's hard, right? Because he just he didn't have a season, really didn't have very much of an off season that we haven't really seen much of him. I think, even what we did see of him this season, it wasn't lighting the world on fire. You have to wonder how much, if it was, hey, I got to make sure I stay healthy through my last year of college football. And unfortunately that didn't work out for him either. So I do. Here's the name that I keep thinking about whenever his name comes up. Whenever Allen's name comes up, I keep thinking about Derek Stingley, right? I keep thinking about how we were just, when he was a freshman, we knew, right? Like how talented this guy was, and that we just waiting on the days for him to be eligible to be drafted, right? And then what happens, his draft eligible season is he has a terrible kind of draft eligible year, right? He's injured. He's dealing with 40 times stuff. There's questions about his speed, right? And he just got made the highest paid cornerback, maybe the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, their edge rushers are higher, but it's the highest paid highest paid defensive back in the NFL by like $5 million.
So and he's earned it, right? So I just think that there is something to the idea that like this guy was supremely talented. Like if you go back a year ago, there were boards that had this guy going number 1 overall, right? Like, he's just been projected as this top corner for years and years. Obviously was a major part of Michigan winning the national championship 2 years ago. I think that scouts don't forget that kind of thing.
Mhm.
They also have the kind of inside knowledge there, which is being shared with these folks that are creating these boards, which are feeding the consensus board. So this is all a long way of saying, I think that this is one of those guys that, a lot of the positives are just outside of our reach and our sight, right? Because we're not seeing him on tape regularly. But the teams that are checking in with this guy, the teams that are doing interviews with their coaches, the guys that are getting their hands to talk to this guy and find out what kind of player he is, they haven't forgotten about that 2023 tape and how good he looked and why he's up there to begin with.
Another player I want to ask you about, this is outside the top 10. This is 11th overall. Is Tetero McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. If you look at the consensus board, I've got them all tracked here. The week of the NFL Combine, so before the event started, he was 7th overall, ahead of Cam Ward, Jalen Walker, Tyler Warren, Amon Menbu, ahead of all those guys. He runs a 4.53 40, which is perfectly fine for him. And now we're down to him at 11th overall. And you wouldn't think dropping from 7 to 11 is that big of a deal, but it is money wise. And it is when we're talking about the Cowboys, because it sure seemed like a month ago, there was no way that he would fall to the Cowboys at 12. And now it seems very likely if you look at all the mock drafts. So do we still think he's an option for the Cowboys in round 1?
Yeah, I think definitely, right? I mean, he certainly is. If he falls to them, I certainly think they will consider him. Yeah, that whole situation is very interesting, right? Because he doesn't run at the combine. I think his stock kind of takes a natural fall there, despite the fact that if you just watch the tape, he looks fast enough. It's not like you're not questioning whether he's fast enough to be an NFL wide receiver. You're just questioning whether he's fast, like generally fast. And I don't think he is generally NFL fast, but he's certainly like more than clears the bar. And I think his pro day kind of proved that. So he took a hit at the combine for not running, but then never kind of got, the return of that stock when he actually ran at the pro day, which, I guess I get, but at the same time, like, if you're avoiding this guy because he ran a 4.56 or whatever, and you weren't sure about that, man, I mean, you need to go back and watch the tape again. Like, I mean, he ran exactly what you expected him, or at least what I expected him to run. And I think his tape before the combine, had everyone placing him in the top 7 picks. I don't really know what happened at the combine that would make me want to drop him out of that.
Me neither. The one other guy I want to mention on the wrong way of this too is Michael Williams. Going into February, right? So just coming out of the Senior Bowl, he was being ranked as the 8th overall player in this class by the NFL draft experts. Again, all the names you recognize. And now his average ranking is 17.5. He's the 15th player overall in the class. We've heard before that the Cowboys like him, that he's a potential option at 12. Do you still feel that way, or do you feel like, that he's somebody now that you consider more in a trade back rather than sitting there at number 12?
I think that his stock is probably a lot more stubborn than draft fans would prefer, right? I think that NFL teams view what this guy is, the kind of ball of clay that he is, and what he did in his previous years, and they're probably not moving him, right? Like, I think that there's, I think they would view it like Stewart, right? Where it's like, well, Stewart didn't have any production, his senior year. And we understand that Mikel Williams is not quite maybe the athlete that Stewart is, but I think you could argue that, he kind of makes up for some of that with the production that at least he's shown at certain points in his career. So, and again, playing in Georgia, it can really screw up with your production numbers as well, because you're playing with a ton of other really talented defenders. So I tend to think that his stock, at least with teams, is probably more bulletproof than it is with draft analysts, because I just think that teams realize, hey, not a ton of these guys out there that are 35-inch plus arms that are 260 that can run and move the way he does. So I bet they'll bet on that.
You mentioned Shamar Stewart. We always hear that, this is so funny to me, that these guys rise after the combine. Oh, he's going to be shooting up draft boards after posting that combine. And Stewart had an unbelievable combine in Indianapolis. Going into the combine, he was being ranked as the 19th overall player. And right now he is being ranked as the 19th overall player.
Overall.
No change at all, which is fascinating to me because I thought for sure he would be somebody that's like a consensus top 10, top 12 pick. Didn't happen.
You got to think that what it is the NFL is learned their lesson about double counting the athleticism, right? Like, okay, yes, Shamar Stewart came in here and blew up the combine, but we knew that Shamar Stewart was going to come in here and blow up the combine. And if he didn't come in and blow up the combine, that would have been the red flag, right? Yeah. So Stewart came in and did what he had to do to be taken in the first round, right?
It feels like the draft analysts aren't counting it twice, which is a good thing. That's what we want to see.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So they cooked it into his initial ranking. He came in, he did what he was supposed to do. Yes, it's very impressive, but it's why he's there in the first place. So we're not going to double count it.
All right, let's talk about our favorite options for the Cowboys at 12, 1 month out. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, football cards, like I've seen my buy. It's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending all in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. I just started using Monarch Money a couple months ago, and I realized how much money I was wasting on non-essential stuff, let's say, whether it's like food delivery or coffee runs or whatever. But now I am budgeting smarter and I'm saving more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks that you can use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories to even who's cutting down the nets at the end of the tournament. Got my eye on a couple sleepers now that we're getting into the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. I know we haven't had very many upsets so far, but I think they're coming. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. Plus, with tournament games happening almost every single day, there's always something fun and exciting to bet on. Plus, the FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Landon, let's talk about some of our favorite picks at 12. I'm sure you and I are going to have different thoughts here, but right now, if you could sign up for one pick that's realistic, not Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, but one realistic pick at 12, what are you looking for?
It's Luther Burden. I'm just kidding. I was taking your guy.
Yes.
I think this is a name that we haven't really talked a ton about because we've talked a lot about these names of the guys that we think are going to be there. This is a name that would definitely be a fall, right? Like I wouldn't expect him to be available at 12, but he's going to be available around 12. And that's Armand Membu. I really am a big fan of the Missouri tackle. And I also just love the fit. Right. Like, I think that he would be a really good fit for what the Cowboys are looking to do, because I think you could come in and he could play right guard now.
That's the thing. You play him at right guard, then move him out to right tackle eventually.
Exactly.
Right?
So, and I think, there's obviously the argument to be made about drafting a guard, but this is different, right? You're drafting a guy who's going to play guard this year, play tackle once Terrence Steele is ready to go. And I think that it doesn't make a ton of sense sequencing wise. Like, I think it doesn't make a ton of sense, like, trying to fill all the needs that you have. And I think that you can get by without drafting a tackle, or a starting offensive lineman. If you had to, I think you could go to battle with the guys that you've got. However, I think drafting Membu is a force multiplier. It certainly makes your interior stronger this year. It's going to make your tackle class much better next year. He's just a guy that, we haven't had the opportunity to talk about him a lot because it feels like early on, especially before the Senior Bowl, he got moved up into the top 10 and probably isn't going to fall out of there. But if something were to happen, board falls weird and he were to fall to the Cowboys at 12, I would be absolutely thrilled to mention him or to have him on the team for sure.
And again, that's not that big of a stretch. On the consensus board right now, he's 8th overall. Shedeur Sanders is not, we didn't mention him, but he's likely to go inside the top 10. That's going to push one of these top 10 prospects down to the Cowboys. So you're talking about a guy falling from 8 to 12. That happens every single year. So that's not unrealistic at all. I'm still of the belief that Ted McMillan would be one of my favorite picks for the Cowboys at 12. We talked about a little bit of the previous segment, so I won't go on too much, but they desperately need a number 2 receiver. I think he can come right in, play in the slot, play it outside, be an X receiver, and just give Dak another weapon. That's one of my favorite options. I did want to ask you about Tyler Warren.
Oh boy, I'm glad you did.
Well, Tyler Warren right now is 6 overall on the consensus board. Now, one of the things we know historically with these drafts, and even like a guy like Brock Bowers, who is one of the best tight end prospects we've ever seen, tight ends tend to fall. So I don't think it would be a shock to see the 6 overall player fall to the Cowboys at 12. If he's on the board, is that a must pick for you?
If he's on the board, I'm taking that phone number and I'm calling the Dallas Cowboys war room, and I am insisting. Yeah, I heard, and I'm insisting that the Cowboys take it. Yeah, I mean, look, I just think for all the reasons that I've gone into multiple times before. I love the player, but I also think I love the fit. He gives you a little bit of everything that you need on offense. He can be a guy who's a key blocker on the front side of run plays. He's a guy who can be the secondary passing weapon that we talked about. He's a yak guy. He give him the ball quickly. He can break tackles. He could be your goal line quarterback. We could run a whole series of wildcat plays with him at quarterback. There's so much to like about him. He's just got such a high floor, and he's just versatile. Obviously, he's my favorite player in this draft.
Yeah. All right. So let's say the draft goes pretty chalk, right? The top 11 players are all off the board. Those lists are Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Ashton Genty, Will Campbell, Tyler Warren, Jalen Walker, Membu, Will Johnson, Cam Ward, and McMillan. And now you're stuck with that next tier of players. And I'm assuming that Shedeur Sanders is not somebody you're taking. So the next guys in the consensus board are Colston Loveland, Campbell, Jihad Campbell, Calvin Banks, Michael Williams, Mike Green, and you can't trade down. What are you doing in that scenario?
I mean, I don't hate the Jihad Campbell fit, right? Like, I do think that you're probably okay at linebacker at this point for the immediate situation and for the long term, just because you've got some youth there that you're excited about. But you add Jihad Campbell to this group, and suddenly your linebacking group looks really, really, really good and young and talented, right? So I definitely wouldn't, poo-poo that. Who are the other names?
Ask you about?
Yeah.
Shamar Stewart, because
again with this.
Well, no, part of me thinks that the only way the Cowboys are going to actually make some noise in the playoffs if they start being a little bit riskier and shooting for more upside, right? Yeah. They have a GM that'll never, ever be fired. So their risk for upside and reward should be greater than most of these other teams, right? And I'm not saying they need to be reckless. And I'm not saying draft somebody that's 35th in the consensus board at 12. But Shamar Stewart is widely believed to be a top 20 prospect in this class. Drafting him at 12 is not a major reach, right?
Yeah.
But the payoff could be really good.
Yeah.
You're talking about like an all-time great athlete. And yes, the production's not there. But man, you put him in a defense with Micah Parsons, you're just gambling on the athleticism and the traits. And if it hits, then you're talking about somebody that can be a real game changer for the Cowboys when it matters.
Yeah, and to be fair, this happens a lot with this draft. When you said Shamar Stewart, my brain heard Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah,
so I was like, no.
Shamar
Stewart. Yeah, so that was my reaction. But I think at 12, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Look, I mean, he's an athlete. It's an upside play. There's no doubt. He didn't produce at a level that you would hope an athlete like him would produce, and I think that's why he would be available at 12 versus in the top 10. Right. Look, there's some extenuating circumstances there. He played on a Texas A&M defensive line that's filled with 5-star players, including guys that had to like transfer to Ole Miss and other schools in order to like get opportunities to play. There's just too many bodies on that Texas A&M defensive line. And Stewart, it's not like he wasn't creating havoc or affecting the play. That's not the case at all. He was doing all those things. It's just that somebody else was usually finishing the play. And the Cowboys have a very translatable situation there, right? Like, hey, Stewart, you want to come in here and disrupt and push all these quarterbacks into the waiting arms of Micah Parsons and Osa Odigizua? That works, man. I love that as well.
Well, the Cowboys have two creators. Micah and Osa are two creators. It'd be really nice to have somebody on the other end that can finish, right? And I think that's what Stewart can do.
Yeah, I think he can do both, right? I think he can be a guy that's like, he's the reason he's pushing you to the other side, and he can also be the reason that, hey, if you're running away from Micah Parsons, you can run into the big, long, waiting arms of Shamar Stewart. So, I think that there is something to the idea that of really supersizing and rocket leaguing your pass rush to the point where it's dominant, it's terrifying to go against, and I think that is a force multiplier for a team when you have a pass rush that is that effective.
I guess to me, like, I think there are better players. Like, I think Kelvin Banks, and let's even say Will Campbell, those guys I think are going to be better players in the NFL, more likely to be better players in the NFL. But you're talking about a guard, or if you want to add in Omarion Hampton, a running back, I just think, man, if you could swing for the fences, and you might not hit, but if you do this every once in a while and you're smart about it, man, I think the rewards could be really, really big here. And frankly, I think that's what the Cowboys need. Some of their biggest hits have been guys that they've gambled on, like Micah Parsons, who played linebacker, who they moved to edge, who didn't play his final year of college, or Tyler Smith, who had a bunch of penalties, but was a great athlete. Like, I think it's okay to take some risks here every once in a while.
Yeah. And if you're going to take a risk on an athletic defensive end, an edge rusher who can really kind of affect the game. They talked about being a selectively aggressive. I would say that this is not normally the type of pick that they would take in the first round. They like to be usually pretty safe. And they've, had issues taking guys with upside defensive ends. Maybe they should have picked somebody who was more athletic, but
I never thought of Taco as like a upside pick, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the upside was the hope that he would develop pass rush moves and that he'd be a good run defender, and neither of those two things happened.
But he was a very average athlete, right? So at least you're gambling on like rare
superstar athlete. Yeah, absolutely. Myles Garrett without the skill, right? I agree. So I think it's certainly worth the risk, and it could be the kind of thing that puts the Cowboys over the top.
All right, let's talk about some trade scenarios because the Cowboys love to trade. They traded back last year during the Tyler Guyton draft. They traded back in the Micah Parsons draft. They are wide open to moving back in this draft. Will they be able to accomplish that this year? We'll get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day, and find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Landon, let's talk about some trade scenarios because the Cowboys love to trade back. How likely do you think it is that they could move back from 12 to late teens, early 20s?
Well, it's like I've talked about all the time. It's fantastic to talk about trade back scenarios, but there's like a bunch of factors that have to happen on draft day in order for it to kind of come to fruition, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times these trades that you kind of work with teams, they are contingent on who is on the board when your pick happens, right? So for the Cowboys, I think it's going to require somebody and it's got to probably be, one of the money 5 positions at least. And even more likely, it probably needs to be a tackle or a quarterback, right? Like maybe a pass rusher. I think that
an elite player that falls to you. Because I've been having this thought, like, I know how deep this running back class is. I know. But I wonder if a team like the Chargers sitting at 22, if they see Ashton Genty fall to 12, if they're like, you know what, we could wait for Hampton to maybe be there or get Quinshon Judkins in round 2. But what if we just go up and get Ashton Genty? How much better does that make our offense right away?
I mean, if they're suckers like that, then I'll certainly take their money, man.
But there always is going to be a team that's willing to be more aggressive than what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but that's what you need, right? You need somebody who's willing to come up as a desire to come up.
Yeah.
You don't really just pitch a trade back situation to a team unless they have, unless they're coming up for somebody. So if Shedeur Sanders or Simmons or I don't know Membu even really falls to you at 12, I think you're going to get a lot more phone calls than you would if they weren't, right? So keeping that in mind, I think that, you're looking at, and these are some teams that we talked about before the show, Seattle, Minnesota. These are teams that have multiple picks that have been aggressive in the past, trading up. You mentioned the Rams, I think is an interesting team that maybe if they wanted to throw a future first or something like that at us. I think what you're looking for is somewhere in that, I've just laid it 18 to 26 range. You don't want to go all the way back to the end of the first round, I don't think, because I think you still kind of have a couple players in mind that you want to get in the trade back, but you definitely want to trade back far enough that you're getting some nice capital, right? And still while still being in range of that kind of plateau of players that happens from 11 to 40, let's say, right? I think that's what you're looking to do, try to recoup another pick, maybe a third or fourth, or depending on how far back you go, maybe even a second. And then just and getting a guy of similar quality that you probably were able to get at 12.
What if we go back even further? Here's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at team windows where teams are desperate to win now, right? Or teams that maybe think they're one player away. And I'm looking at Buffalo at 30. And I know that's a big drop going from 12 to 30.
Yeah.
But what if Buffalo looks at give me a player? I don't think it would be Ashton Genty. I don't think.
Let's say a wide receiver, right? They need wide receiver help, don't they?
Yeah, they could use a receiver. Let's even go Jalen Walker. Maybe they have Jalen Walker as a top 5 player on their board, right? Like I do.
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo's got 2 second-round picks. They've got pick 56 and 62. Would you drop back from 12 to 30 to pick up 56 and 62? That would give you picks 44, 56, and 62 all in the second round.
I think it depends on who's on the board, but I think I might,
Well, let's go look at some names here. Like if you're looking at the consensus board, these are all guys that are very likely to be available around there. Tyler Booker, Emeka Buka, Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon, James Pierce, Donovan Izariki, Donovan Jackson. Maybe you'll get Luther Burden in that range, considering he's fallen a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly like picking in that range. Again, it's about who you're trading away from, right? Like who's there at 12. That would be the question. But honestly, again, I think I've said this many times. To me, the best option in round 1 almost exclusively includes a trade back. So.
I agree. Yeah. I want to talk about trading up from round 2 because that is something that we don't see the Cowboys trade up in round 1 very often. The last time was 2012 when they traded up for Morris Claiborne, I believe, right?
I think so.
Yeah. But we've seen them trade up in round 2 several times, whether that was to go get Sean Lee in 2010. They went up and got DeMarcus Lawrence. They are very aggressive in targeting these last of their first round grades or a tier drop off. The Cowboys pick at 44. To go from 44 to 34, it would cost them 100 points, which would basically be you could probably
do
5th
rounds or
it could be
third and then some stuff back, right?
Yeah, it probably would be hey, we'll give you a third, you give us your 4th back, or something like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's what the Cowboys are going to try to do here, because I know the depth of this class is really good, but if you could leave this draft with pick your favorite player in round 1, let's say Ted McMillan, and then you come back with Kenneth Grant or Derek Harmon or Walter Nolan, and we're leaving the first 2 days of the draft with those 2 guys, it's pretty hard to say no to that.
And then you just wait until the end of the draft for your running back, or I guess you'd be getting a 3rd round or 4th round.
Yeah, you'd be getting a 3rd round pick back in this scenario, right? Or 4th round pick back in this scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes some sense, right? Obviously, it's a little bit of a gamble for the running back run, right? But I think if you're going to take a gamble, taking a gamble on the fact that there's going to be a quality running back in the 4th round still available, I think is about as safe a gamble as you could make, probably.
And I think it would depend on the position, right? It's got to be one of those money 5 positions. They're not trading a 3rd round pick to go get like Tyler Booker. As much as I like Tyler Booker, like I just don't see
No,
them
no, no,
trading
no.
up to get a guard.
I agree.
But if it's like a corner, right? Like maybe Jade Barron falls because teams are concerned about the short arms and
Or Benjamin Morrison, right? Like there's any chance that he could definitely be there. You know,
Oh,
just like there's
absolutely.
lots of these guys that you feel like could fall, right?
Well,
And
and
you might
I
get an
could see a
upside anyway.
scenario where they draft, let's say it's Shamar Stewart in round 1, like that's who they pick, and then Emeka Ibuka is available at pick 34, and it's like, okay, we really want to get a number 2 receiver. Ibuka's still there at 34. Let's just go get him.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too, for sure.
Yeah.
And again, in a draft where you feel like you can wait on running back, if you had to, you can double dip and still get a very good quality backfield. I think it makes some sense to go up maybe a couple spots and get a guy that you think is falling that can really fill that second need. Man, if you came out of this class with a, potentially, hopefully growing to elite pass rusher and your secondary pass catching weapon,
Yeah.
I mean, everything else outside of that feels like gravy, especially at a running back position where you could double dip, you could go get a vet. There's lots of
Yeah.
options there.
And in this scenario, you're getting the risk and the reward at 12 with Stewart, but you're also getting some safety with Ibuka in round 2. And what does it cost you? Like a mid-round pick swap? It's just not that big of a deal. And they've got so many picks on day 3. They're going to have a bunch of comp picks in 2026 that you could steal from if you wanted to go get a running back in this class. I fully expect the Cowboys to be aggressive. I would be shocked if they don't make some kind of trade in the first 2 days of the draft.
Yeah, they got 7 picks in the last 3 rounds. Use some of those, right?
Yeah.
But even if it's just to go get a vet, but like you're probably not going to draft 7 guys in the
No.
last 3 rounds.
No.
Figure out a way to use them in a more productive manner.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you check out the new Locked On NFL Draft Show. Go follow our show on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on X at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we will see you right here tomorrow.